What was the most ridiculous thing you got in trouble for at school? In 7th grade, one of my best friends was accused of swearing in class. He was a bit of a troublemaker, so when the teacher heard the bad word she automatically assumed it was him and told him to leave. The kid behind him then raised his hand and said that he swore and apologized. The teacher accepted his apology and then sent my friend to the principal's office. My friend was very confused at this point and asked her why he had to go when he had done nothing wrong. She then snapped a ruler in half and threw it at him and told him for the destruction of school property. That, I would have to say, is the most ridiculous thing I have ever seen someone get in trouble for. I was a bit of a troublemaker. I once was called into the principal's office in 3rd grade and was told I was getting a referral, missing recess, because I had been standing instead of sitting when sledding down the sledding hill, against the rules, during morning recess. Thing is, I had missed that earlier recess because I had been serving a referral for one reason or another in the principal's office. I pointed this out to the principal and she shrugged and said that somebody had done it and she had been told it was me, so that was the end of it. I missed another recess. I became a lawyer. This is a great villain origin story. We had a girls in trance and a boys in trance at my secondary modern school, UK, in 1972. I was 12 and proud of the result of my first visit to a proper grown-up hairdresser's, what we now call a mullet, but back then was known as a feather cut, and was extremely fashionable for both boys and girls at the time. I was in the crowd going through the door when a teacher roared, "You boy, what do you think you're doing?" Being very much a girl, I didn't take any notice until I felt a hand of impending doom on my shoulder. It was my own form teacher who didn't recognize me without my waist-length ponytail. What is the point of gendered entrances? Girls have cooties. I finished my exam within 15 minutes, but got scolded for not taking it seriously, then told me to actually use my brain until the time runs out. So I went back to my seat and sleep for 80 minutes. The day after the result is out, and I got an almost perfect score. Also, one time I dated the principal's only daughter. Had similar. Ohio had proficiency tests week, one subject a day, that was at a supposed 9th grade level, which you had to pass all of or else you could not graduate your senior year. They started the tests in 8th grade. Once you passed a subject you did not have to take the test again. In 8th grade, when we were given the tests, I finished in half the time. Then, since we could not leave, handed it in, then took out video game magazines to read. My homeroom teacher hated that. She eventually called my mom midweek and my mom was mad, thinking I was not trying. Out of hundreds of kids in my 8th grade class in that school, only 2 passed all the 9th grade proficiency tests. I was one of them. This also allowed me, since they did the tests twice a year from 9th grade to 12th, to come in very late for half school days. I'm glad I never had those, because they sound like they suck. On the other hand, Cedar Point is a great amusement park. Not in trouble, but I got called down to the dean's office, cause a girl was really into me, and I wasn't about it, so he called me down to tell me not to make it weird for her. When I was in 9th or 10th grade, I threatened to light a kid on fire when he tried to touch my tit. Then, we both got in trouble. I wasn't particularly outgoing or popular, but every girl in the school, 612 magnet, had a rally thing where they got together in the forum, basically a huge room in the middle of the school beneath the stairs and stuff, during lunch, and started telling stories of being harassed and assaulted in school and how the teachers reacted, or didn't most of the time. Parents showed up. It was a fiasco. Nothing changed though. I dropped out junior year. Always gotta love that school system. All the girls, we were sexually harassed at your school while under your supervision. Teachers, okay, but can you please get back to class? In the 80s, yes, I'm a boomer, we had an art teacher very interested in modern art. In one of the lectures, he had a glowing talk on Andy Warhol's film, Man Sleeping. It's a film where a man sleeps for 8 hours, and the camera only changed position once to change film rolls. So after my friend and I talked with him about the limits of how far you could push art, he answered that if the intent was there and nobody got hurt, you could take it to the limit. During recess, my friend and I broke into the art studio piled up all the chairs into an enormous heap of furniture, and took paint buckets to splash onto the chairs. When our teacher, dear Mr. Cholville, came back and found our pile of chairs and paint, he went ballistic. But after explaining that we had an artistic intent and nobody got hurt, we had accomplished our goal of making art. After huffing and puffing, he finally conceded and agreed. Our principal, however, didn't find it quite as artistic. Got the highest score in art that year, though. That made me think of the story of my, father-in-law. He had an art project due, and he had no clue what to make of it. It had to be modern art, and the topic was transitoriness. I hope I translated that correctly. Essentially, that nothing lasts forever. So the day before the deadline, he wrapped some wire around an apple and handed it in. Of course, the teacher essentially asked WTF it was supposed to be, and how it in any way, shape or form fit the topic of transitoriness. My father-in-law's response, just wait a couple of weeks and you'll see. He got an A+ and his by that time rotting apple in a wire was part of many expositions at that school. Transience would be closer to what I assume you were going for. In high school, friends and I played ultimate frisbee in the mornings out on a practice field. Not an official club, just peening around, but most days we had a teacher there to make sure we didn't get hurt/sue the school or some BS. Anyway, one day we didn't have a teacher there, and the school officer/guard guy decided it was his chance to get us in deep crap. Being kids, he ran around the field/football stadium to get away from his lard ass. Eventually the secondary ice guard and the first/main one cornered us and took down our names. Told us we'd be getting detention for running away from school, which wasn't the case. We just ran around a field from where he was. Whatever. So all day long, my friends are getting called down to the principal's office, telling their sides of the story in 2s and 3s. I never get called. See, I'm one of those people who is a junior, but go by my middle name to avoid confusion with my dad. So when lard ass officer took down our names, me not thinking just gave my name as I go by it, middle, last. The school had no record of a kid with that name, so I didn't get called in. Why didn't they see my first, middle, and last name in the record and call me down? Who knows? Administration was dumb. Nobody got in actual trouble as everyone had the same story about running around the field and not away from school grounds. But still, weird story about a fat-ass guard. Not happy kids were getting exercise and having fun early in the morning. Ultimate is fun. I'm glad my school has an official club for it. That got reorganized into roughly the first Galactic Empire Rally disc golf course of the pandemic. Got in trouble for participating in a group science experiment. The class was divided into several groups, 4 or 5 students per group. We didn't have benches for experiments, since it was a standard classroom, not a science lab, so the equipment for each group was placed on a desk. My groupmates were crowded around the desk and there wasn't really room for me. Plus it was a simple experiment, so there wasn't anything for me to actually do anyway. So I sat at an adjacent desk, facing our group's equipment, watched what my groupmates were doing, and took notes. The teacher decided that I wasn't participating, which wasn't entirely wrong I guess, but refused to let me explain that there wasn't room for me or anything for me to do, and that I was taking notes on the experiment. He made me sit in the hall for the remainder of the class period and gave me detention, which I didn't bother showing up for. Never got in trouble for skipping detention, which I thought was kind of weird. You never got into trouble, because when he escalated it to his boss, he was told to stop being ridiculous. I've had anxiety and depression since I was a kid, so obviously that means I have emotional issues. I really needed to talk to someone, so I'd talk to one of the guidance counselors a lot. One time when I needed him, I think he wasn't available. I checked back later, and the principal told me to stay in class. I went to check one more time if he was available. The principal happened to go by, and he gave me 2 days of detention. I made a big deal and he cut it to just 1 day. My middle school was trash. Also my high school accused me of terrorism, but that's another story. Is it time for the other story? Long story short, I make punk rock, and sometimes I say things that are particularly spicy. I did a satirical song from the viewpoint of Donald Trump highlighting bigotry, which used some heavy language. Other songs mentioned hot button issues such as the opioid epidemic and school shootings. Put all this together, along with the fact that I'm a straight white guy who's somewhat of a loner, and accusations fly, I got suspended for 3 days, and apparently my name was forwarded to a state agency to assess whether or not I was a risk. I never got charged or anything, but high school was hell. Kind of a miracle I didn't kill myself, honestly. I had a quite strange art teacher. She was always trying to look the best in front of everyone, but also loved to degrade children for being less talented than herself. One day we were supposed to draw a beach, and she told us to only color it stroke by stroke, with color pencils, and only in one direction. We also weren't allowed to rotate the paper, because real artists never do that, and I later learned that it was a total BS. At that moment I was like, if I color it equally strong nobody will see the strokes either way. An art teacher noticed my technique, so I got suspended for coloring the way a 7-year-old child would. My art teacher also always told us to color in one direction. Never got why. I switched schools, but I never got anything but a F in her class. This is actually a real thing. It's cuz if you color with a colored pencil, you can't get the thing you are filling in with all color. So if you go up and down and then side to side it looks like scribbling, whereas with only up and down it looks better. It's hard to explain but yeah. Had a marker put, and kid bumped into me. He turned around to say sorry and the marker grazed his shirt leaving a small mark. We both said oh, sorry, and was kind of funny. Some kid told a teacher I chased the kid with the marker to intentionally draw on him. The teacher didn't believe, and the original guy for some reason. I almost got caned by the principal, instead 2 lunch detentions. That was the day I lost faith in adults, and knew they can actually be wrong and make mistakes. I had something similar. Former friend that stole money from me, and could I never prove it? I didn't notice until weeks later. Anyway he's in my class and I'm mad so I hold up an orange marker to his shirt and said I'm going to make you with this. He dares me by saying do it. So I did. He called out to the teacher when class started he marked my shirt. Teacher looked at me and I calmly said he told me to, and that was the end of it. I couldn't figure out how to do a problem in my math class. Had my engineer dad help me with it. The way he showed me wasn't the way she taught us. She walked around the next day to check our papers and sees my work doesn't match hers. She asks me why I didn't do it the way she told us to, and I told her that I couldn't figure it out, but that my dad helped me with it, and I understand it this way. She went ballistic. Full on screaming at me in front of the class about how I think I'm so smart and know so much more than her, how I'm just trying to make her look like an idiot and undermine her authority in front of her students. How I should have come to see her privately to tell her that instead of flaunting it in front of the class. What? Then she kicked me out. Not go to the principal, just pointed at the door and told me to get out of her classroom. Went to the office and told them what happened. She never even called them to say she booted me. Never got in trouble officially and never got an apology from her. 5 years later my brother was in her class and she blew up on him similarly for not paying attention in class. He has severe AD that hadn't been diagnosed at the time.